We all grew up hearing the stories of things that go bump in the night. The man with a hook for a hand, Bloody Mary, the list goes on. We grow up hearing these stories and putting them to the back of our brain, using our rational minds to weed out what is true and what is just folklore. I used to think the same way until I went there. Before I go any further, I'd like to note that we had a very different kind of hobby we enjoyed. We would research places on the internet that were abandoned or, hell, if we were lucky, possibly haunted, and we would go explore them. We always had a great thrill exploring the unknown, looking into places that society had left behind to rot. Oh, now returning to my story. I was 18 at the time, and I was with my two friends, Eric and Paul. It was a Saturday night, and we decided to go on one of our adventures. I told my friends about a place we hadn't explored yet. A few towns over, there was an abandoned factory. Strangely, even with the amounts of research I put into this place, I could not find a single thing about its history besides the address. There was no information on what it used to be, no ghost stories, no records, absolutely nothing. This seems strange, but cool. It kinda gave me the thought of possibly uncovering some interesting information myself. We all piled into my car and followed the GPS to the destination. The GPS said that the building was off the roads away. We looked out the window and saw nothing but trees. I assumed the factory was deep in the woods, but this didn't faze any of us because we were so used to exploring the darkest and creepiest parts of the world. As we started to cut through the trees, I shined my flashlight a ways and found the factory up ahead. It was huge, overgrown with trees and foliage. It must have been about 3 stories high, and all of the windows were either busted or boarded. We hit the jackpot. The 3 of us proceeded into the derelict structure and put on our respirators. Safety first, right? There was junk everywhere. Cans, old motors, trinkets of a different era, way before mine. And as we found more items, we came to the conclusion that this used to be some sort of automotive factory. As we continued deeper into the building, I felt something wrong. Like a nauseating feeling of wrongness just swept my body like a wave. I stopped for a moment, and Eric asked, "What's wrong?" Not wanting to sound like a pussy, I just waved him off and kept walking. Towards the centre of the building, there was a set of stairs. This place was creepy enough without a staircase that only goes down. I'd never felt this feeling before, but I actually didn't want to go down there. I shined my light down the steps and stared for a moment. All there was silence. "Come on, you guys are acting like a bunch of pussies," I remember Paul saying. He led first. Me and Eric followed close. We finally hit the bottom, and to my unnerving surprise, there was an arm of a mannequin laying on the ground. I thought to myself, what would something like this be doing here? The feeling instantly got worse. We cautiously scanned the room with our lights and the beams illuminating the dust or whatever was in the air. With the room illuminated by our flashlights, it was obvious that there really wasn't anything amazing down here, just more motors and junk. We were about to turn around and head back up, until I noticed something behind what appeared to be a large boiler. So I walked up to it, and it was a door. It was very short, about half my height. It was also covered in rust. I slowly opened the door and stepped inside. Without thinking, I walked forward intrigued yet horrified. I turned around and shined my light back in the room I came from, and my friends were missing. The door then shut. There was no handle. There was no way out but in. I was terrified, but I couldn't even think straight. I banged on the door. I screamed for my friends and nothing happened. I turned around and shined my light, and what I found was an old rusted ladder leading down into a dark hole. Clearly, there was nothing I could do but go down and hope there was a way out. A horrible smell came from the hole. I proceeded down the ladder, and I noticed about every 10 feet the brick shaft I was descending would look more decrepit and dirtier than it initially was. It seemed unnatural. But then I finally hit the bottom, and the smell got worse. The floor was flooded up to my ankles in murky water. I shined my light forward, and my beam didn't hit the end of the room. It was huge. I had to be dreaming, because how could this be under an automotive factory? The deeper I moved in the room, the more mannequin parts I saw. Heads, arms, legs, everything. And some had red liquid dripping from the eyes and mouth. Even deeper, there were mannequins that were standing. Some were missing arms and heads, and they got more frequent as I kept walking. As I walked even deeper, there were more intact mannequins, the red liquid still dripping from the faces. I began to panic. The more mannequins I passed, the closer they got. They just kept closing in on me. I eventually hit a wall, and there was a rusted door. Without thinking, I burst through the door and ended up outside the factory. I was standing behind the building. Before I could turn around to see what happened, the door was already shut. I didn't even attempt to second guess what I saw by opening the door. I just wanted to go home. I walked back to my car and drove off. I was so drained, I wasn't even concerned about my friends. They probably called for some ride. I began to drive and noticed that I haven't seen many cars. I knew it was late, but actually, I didn't see one car the entire ride back. I arrived home. There were no cars in the driveway. This was very odd because both my parents never stay out late. It was still pouring with rain. I ran to the porch to avoid getting soaked. As I went to turn the knob, I noticed it was also unlocked. I got that nauseating feeling I had at the factory again. I needed sleep. I cautiously entered the house, dropping my gear and climbing the steps. I went to flip on the lights, but nothing happened. A storm probably blew out the power. I walked to my parents' room. The door was slightly ajar. I slowly opened it with a loud creaking noise. I shined my flashlight in the room and saw 2 mannequins standing behind my parents' bed. These ones were different though. They both had a large, sinister-looking smile running across their faces. Mannequins don't look like that. I panicked. I ran for my room and I slammed the door. My heart was pounding and I began to sweat. I heard my closet door open. I turned around and felt my heart sink into my stomach. I saw a mannequin standing in my closet. It had Eric's skin stretched over the white body. His face was crudely pinned to the mannequin's face. There were dark holes where his eyes and mouth would have been. Blood dripped from the messy skin which covered the mannequin. The head turned towards me and said in Eric's voice, Curiosity killed the cat. His mouth moved as he uttered the words. The limbs began to rotate, ripping the flesh as it did so. I then heard a loud ringing in my ear, and my head was pounding. I felt nauseous again, and threw up. I blacked out. I woke to the sight of my two friends' faces. We were in the basement of the factory. "Whoa, easy man, you blacked out. Looks like you hit your head pretty hard," Eric said. I eventually sat up and began to tell them about the room behind the boiler, the large room, the mannequins, and the confrontation with the one wearing Eric's skin. They were confused, so I got up and walked behind the large boiler to show them the door. It was gone.